What do you know? 360's marketplace is being shut down. You've got just short of a year to buy all the games that you're interested in before they're gone forever. A lot of games have already been delisted over the years, but worry not, because there's still a lot of great stuff available. Let's start with this meme.
Peggle 2!
Peggle, released in 2007, is a pachinko style of game where you have to hit all the orange pegs before running through your balls. Peggle 2 is like an exaggerated version of the first game. The new peg types and specials expand the game's variety, and are a lot of fun to use. But what stood out to me is the change of art style and tone compared to Peggle 1. What's better is a matter of opinion. I think both are fine. Ultimately, this is everything I'd want from a Peggle sequel. It currently sells for $12. Geometry Wars 2. The goal of the game is to endlessly destroy the geometric invaders without getting hit. This twin-stick shooter series got its start in an original Xbox game, Project Gotham Racing 2. Years later, an enhanced version came to XBLA, then came the sequel. You've got new gameplay modes to unlock, and even crazier graphical effects. To unlock new modes, you'll have to play the existing modes for a bit. Doesn't take long. I really like the King mode, where you can only shoot in these slowly closing circles. As it depletes, you'll have to find another to keep shooting. Also included is 4-player local multiplayer, which is probably a great time. Geometry Wars 2 is still up, selling for $10. Trials Evolution, another XBLA mega hit, which was sadly delisted many years ago. Trials started as a web browser game, eventually becoming Trials HD on XBLA, with Evolution being the sequel. It's known for being chaotic and wildly unrealistic, just as it should be. There are unbelievable jumps, explosions, and ragdoll physics. Oh, there goes your bike. Dude, why are you moving so much? Oh my god. SkyDrift is another delisted game. If you've played the fast-paced Wipeout series, you can expect similar shenanigans here. The biggest difference is that you're in the sky. Flying these aircraft feels great. The handling is really well done. I had a lot of fun playing this on PC years ago, where the game had beautiful lighting and reflections. Not so much on 360. SkyDrift was remastered under the name SkyDrift Infinity, which is still available to buy for $15. For every time I've covered XBLA, there's always someone begging me to play Doritos Crash Course. Now I can see why. It's entertaining. Imagine Wipeout turned into an endless runner. But wrong Wipeout. Yeah, that's it. The player can choose their avatar in-game, which I always like to see. This is the sort of game where watching it isn't going to be too effective in demonstrating the experience. You're going to be constantly readjusting yourself and compensating for tiny mistakes that add up over time. Running long stretches without failure, however, is quite a thrill. This game is free, so why not give it a look? Bit.Trip Runner 2.
I'm Charles Martinet, and now it's time.
Wait, what? I recorded this the day of his retirement. What a coincidence. The Bit.Trip series has some unique games, known for their 8-bit style. The original runner isn't on XBLA, but this was. Now it's delisted. Completing runs is somewhat entertaining. I feel the charm of the original in 8-bit strongly overpowers what this one does in 3D. The gameplay has been preserved for the most part though, so if this looks like a good time, then I'd say check it out, if you have the means to. N+. The original N is an Adobe Flash game from 2004. The goal is to guide the ninja to each level's exit carefully, without getting killed by the numerous hazards. N+ is a bit of a remaster, arriving 4 years later on Xbox Live Arcade exclusively, with updated graphics. There's no denying the fun factor of N's wall-hopping gameplay. Each map has a unique challenge that relies on the player's skill, and oftentimes patience, to succeed. I've sunk countless hours into the PSP version. It's highly addictive. Too bad it was delisted. But the sequel, N++, is still available for $15. Super Meat Boy. This started as a Newgrounds Flash game, eventually becoming the multi-million seller known as Super Meat Boy. In a similar vein to N+, you'll be bouncing off walls while making your way to the exit. Super Meat Boy practically guarantees a fast-paced experience due to his lightweight physics. A single jump is capable of taking the player to great distances. This is accelerated by many environmental factors like fans, and even launching saw blades, which you'll have to quickly escape from. I love the little meat trails he leaves behind. Helps inform me of where I've been after dying. What's really fun is seeing all your failed attempts after a level is complete. Super Meat Boy is filled with clever puzzles. Its frequent creativity makes it impossible to put down. So for $15, you can't go wrong here. Fez. In this relaxing puzzle platformer, the goal is to collect a predetermined amount of cubes to open nearby locked doors. What makes Fez truly unique is the world rotation mechanic. As the perspective changes, so too does the reality of what you see in front of you. For example, there might be a bridge that you have to cross, but should you rotate the screen, there's no need to cross it anymore. Might take some time to fully wrap your head around this, but once you do, it's great fun to experiment with. Fez has a strong immersion factor to it, from the shadows casting on surfaces to the time of day changing the longer you play. This seems like the sort of game that many would be nostalgic for by now. It brings me back to a familiar time where games were almost unbelievably creative. I was in high school when this released, and I recall my friend group talking about it pretty often. I can't wait to tell them that I finally played it. Wait, no, that group disbanded more than 10 years ago. Ain't that a late 20s feel? I'll have to try this game again someday. It's still available for $10. Boogie Bunnies. What do you get after a bunch of developers create a third-person shooter about murdering Teletubby creatures? Boogie Bunnies, apparently. In this cute puzzler, you'll be matching colored bunnies in threes. Score enough points and the bunnies will boogie. They take a step forward every 3 turns, and if enough pass the border, you'll get a game over. Complete levels to unlock new locations. The final destination is Hollywood. Unfortunately, getting there takes far too long. The first Arctic world is about 20 minutes in length, and it only gets longer from there. Still, the game is fairly enjoyable for what it is. My biggest complaint might be the lack of a highlighted path between you and the bunnies. The little-known PC version shows a star underneath them. Shame that that's not here. The atmosphere of Boogie Bunnies is charming, with a cheery soundtrack. Not sure if I'd recommend this over others of its sort like Astropop, but either way, it sells for $5. Originally going by the title Crazy Ball, here's Switchball. It's a creative marble game filled with physics puzzles. Each level is a sort of mini-maze where the player has to reach the exit. On the way there, the regular marble may struggle to pass certain areas, which is why you'll need to find a switch booth to swap to a different ball type. For example, steel, air, or power. The puzzles aren't too complex, from what I played at least, but there are some interesting spins here and there. For example, this part where I'm suddenly being launched from a cannon. For $5, I recommend Switchball. Just try to ignore all that nasty screen tearing. Here's Marble Blast Ultra, the sequel to Marble Blast Gold. By name, you'd think this is pretty similar to the last game, but this is more akin to something like Super Monkey Ball, with objectives and power-ups. The gyrocopter caught me a bit off guard. There's also a temporary gravity manipulator. Probably crazier stuff too later into the game. Bounce around, find out. While Marble Blast Ultra is delisted, its sequel, Marble It Up Ultra, is still available for $30. Plants vs. Zombies. This game was on just about everyone's phones at some point. In summary, defend your rightful property against zombies with the use of your hostile plants. For all intents and purposes, it's a tower defense game that's visually clean and loaded with charm. And that extends to the soundtrack. As you play, you're awarded new plant types. Usually this means a new zombie is about to be introduced, which requires the use of this plant to eliminate. Having to adapt to the changing environment is what keeps this from being too repetitive. Something that makes the console version of this game neat is that there's a built-in 2-player cooperative mode. I recommend it. It's a great way to play through this classic again. Plants vs. Zombies sells for $5. Orcs Must Die. You're given a spellbook to choose from, which has weapons and defense items. Make your selection, then enter the arena, where the tower defense begins. All you gotta do is make sure that the orcs don't make it to the rift. Build spike traps, sticky tar traps, arrow walls, and more to keep them at bay. It's incredibly easy to get into if you've played these sorts of games before, but even if you haven't, I think it's a great entry point for the genre. Orcs Must Die sells for $15, with multiple sequels also available. Aegis Wing. If you've had a 360 before, then you might have already played this. It used to be free, and was at one point the first game in the alphabetical listing. Unfortunately, since then it's been delisted. Aegis Wing was made by students at the California State University. They set out to make a traditional bullet hell, and they did just that. It was released around the time of Halo 3's beta, which meant a lot of people were actively online. Many considered it a fun distraction from the server problems that game was having at the time. I wouldn't say you're missing out on too much with this being delisted, but it's not a bad game. You know Yars Revenge, the classic Atari 2600 game? Well, do you know Yars Revenge, the Xbox 360 game? Based on the original 1982 story, Yar must now hunt down the Kotile Queen Goptri in order to please some weirdo hooded creatures. I love how the intro cutscene is 2 minutes of the same few pictures panning in different directions. No voice acting, just subtitles. It's so odd. The gameplay is fine. It's a twin-stick, on-the-rails shooter with a variety of special attacks at your disposal. The primary fire is kinda boring, but I did like the rechargeable railgun. Sadly, I can't say this game is particularly good at anything. It looks average, sounds average, and plays average. Feels like one of those arcade games that you'd find in a 2000s cinema, which only a handful would ever actually try. There are worse ways of spending your time, I guess, but definitely better ways to spend $5. Far Cry Blood Dragon. Built on the foundation of Far Cry 3, Blood Dragon was an unexpected, standalone cyberpunk-styled first-person shooter. In tone, it's more of an interpretation of the future from an 80s point of view. You'll be exploring a vast open world while completing objectives as they're handed to you. Beating more missions gives you access to more stuff like weapon upgrades. Gameplay is as you'd expect from a AAA shooter of its time. Weapons feel nice and punchy. Well, some of them. The laser weapons kinda suck, but you eventually get a shotgun and minigun around the same time, which are both freaking awesome. Too bad it takes about an hour to get here. I'm glad I sat down to play this a second time, because after the first session, I thought it was kinda slow and boring. The visuals are very consistent. Bright neon lights as far as the eye can see. Soundtrack is spot on as well. The main complaint I've heard about this game is that it's too short. For $15, well, that makes sense. What the hell? Call of Juarez Gunslinger. I've only played this game in the series, but from what I understand, this cel-shaded sequel is quite a deviation from the others. Still a western, but more linear and fast-paced. Gunslinger has a focus on story, frequently cutting back to the narrator as he gloats about his glory days.
I tried to be stealthy and sneak my way past.
The western theme is really well done, and the ongoing story had me immersed in the game world. But I'm in it for the shooting, which is great fun, especially with the controller vibration. Gameplay is very arcade-esque, with point scores and combo markers frequently showing on screen. You've even got short QuickTime events, and a concentration mode that slows down time.
And just when I thought I was done with them, more of these hapless bastards would pop up.
Then at the end of a level, you'll end up in a standoff where you have to keep the crosshair steady to focus as it keeps moving around. There's more I could say about this game, but I'll cut it there. It's fun, it's $15, and I recommend it. Who Wants to Be a Millionaire Special Editions.
Answer the next 15 questions correctly and you'll win $1 million.
I'm including this one as more of an extra. I used to play a pirated version of it a lot on PC. This presentation is unexpectedly good for what it is. Game show games were usually low-effort cash grabs back when, but here you can tell they put actual effort into making this feel just like the show. You've got your talkative host in front of you, a perfectly simple menu system, and, of course, all the famous Millionaire themes. Too bad this was delisted, although maybe that's a blessing in disguise, because I remember hearing about it having several incorrect answers. But all I can find about this today is one discussion on the Steam page.
Are you certain you want to walk away at this point?
That's all for today. I know this selection doesn't have some of the home run hitters like Castle Crashers and Spelunky. There were a few others I wanted to look at as well, Sanctum 2 is one example. Sadly, I can't install more games right now as my 360's too far away from my modem, but I might take another look into these games down the line, so let me know some of your favorites in the comments. They could show up in a future video. Regardless on what you end up buying from the XBLA, these days I suggest investing into a modded 360. It's the only way you're going to be playing a lot of these. But there is of course emulation, if that's your preferred route. Many of these emulate quite well on an Xbox Series console, so long as you know what you're doing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.